fast and furious times that everyone's been going through, I just want to kind of start by saying thanks to everyone. I don't know that we always get to do this, but thanks for all of the hard work all across the state, public health officials to our school officials. I know these are unusual times. I've joked a little bit about I look someday forward to reflecting on all this, but I might prefer to forget it all, quite honestly. And I suspect I'm not the only one. But we will continue to get through this. I'm excited for some of the progress that folks are making in their fall planning. Excited to be able to share a little bit with you about those things today. I'm pleased, as always, to have the governor on with us. And Governor, I'll kind of turn it over for your initial comments, and then we'll jump into public health. I know we got Teresa Anderson on. I think we're also going to have Pat Lopez and some of her team to talk about kind of the campaign around masks. And then we've got our folks from some of our school folks, NERCs in particular, I think today, with a little focus on the planning efforts that they've made. And then finally, we'll kind of hit on some of the work that we have going on across the agency. So Governor, I'll turn it over to you, and appreciate you joining again.
My pleasure. Thanks very much, Commissioner. I appreciate having me on. And again, thank you to everybody on the call and all that you've been doing over the course of these last 4 months to be able to adapt to the new world of the pandemic, to be able to make the changes in how you're providing the education, the nutrition, all of that. And then, of course, getting ready to have kids back in the classrooms this fall, which will present a whole new series of challenges. So it's never a dull moment around here when we've got a pandemic going. First of all, just with regard to where we are in the state of Nebraska, we're in a very good place. It's been very stable. We've got the lowest number of hospitalizations we've had since we've been able to, since before, actually, we've had good data on this. We started really getting good data April 25th, and we had 149 cases. And we reached a peak of that when we hit the 100 or 200 and some cases that we had on May 20th. And so we've been on a steady decline ever since then, which is really good news. We want to continue to see that, because that is really the key factor with regard to what we're looking at, which is those hospitalizations, because this has always been about making sure we flatten the curve to be able to make sure we preserve our hospitalizations. And right now we've got 101 people that are in the hospitals across the state of Nebraska. I think on May 31st, we had 214. So you can see that we've significantly reduced that number. And we've got 21 folks on ventilators, which is also about as low since we've been able to keep track of good data on this. So very pleased with regard to that. If you look at our cases, they're fairly steady across the state. We've seen that we've got the lowest or fourth lowest mortality rate in the country. If you look at some of the places where we had, particularly Hall Hit, I know Teresa Anderson's on, I think we've been in single-digit cases in Hall County since May 17th. And that's pretty representative of all the counties where we've had those food processing facilities. We've been in single digits really just about everywhere across the state in those for a number of weeks now, which is good news. We continue to pay attention to what's going on with regard to Omaha and Lincoln, because those are obviously our largest population centers. But the news has been pretty good out of Omaha and Lincoln over the last several weeks as well. Obviously, we've been taking steps to loosen the restrictions. We took our most recent step actually today with Hall, Hamilton, Merrick, and Dakota counties joining in phase 3 with the rest of the state that went into phase 3 on June 22nd. And now we're continuing to monitor where we are with regard to the hospitalizations and cases, and we'll really probably keep that running until about the middle of July, and then do another checkpoint and see where we are. Obviously, we want to continue to have people practice our social distancing. And if you've watched any of my press conferences, you'll know that's one of the things we continue to emphasize. And I was pleased to see that at least one of the news outlets picked up my line that said, if you want to watch Husker football this fall, wear a mask when you go to the store. So that was good news. And that's what we continue to emphasize is people staying 6 feet apart with regard to, when they're out in public from other people, to wear a mask when you go to the store, and then wash your hands often. If we can just follow some of those basic rules, we'll be in much better shape than some of the other states that we've seen rising cases. And of course, on top of all of this, we've got the lowest unemployment rate in the country. So if we can keep our hospitalizations down and continue to have a low unemployment rate, I'd be ecstatic if we can pursue that through the end of the year. But again, that's only going to be possible if we continue to practice social distancing. So again, overall, state's in pretty good shape. We got to continue that. We'll look to check again middle of July with regard to where we are with regard to cases and hospitalizations, and then we'll make a determination with regard to phase 4 and the timing of that. Then just finally, with regard to schools, you probably saw my comments in the paper in the World Herald that I don't have any plans to issue any sort of DHMs with regard to schools going forward. I believe that you all know your school districts better than anybody else. So when it comes to what sorts of procedures and protocols you want to put in place to bring kids back, you're going to have a better idea. Some schools are going to be more densely packed. They may have certain set of rules. Other schools maybe less so, and they can have other types of rules. So I don't have any plans to put a DHM in place. And of course, that is all predicated on making sure that we continue to have a stable environment here with regard to our hospital system in the state of Nebraska. So that's kind of where we are with this. Right now, we're just continuing to do the blocking and tackling of testing. We've got robust testing capabilities. We can do over 3,000 tests a day at Test Nebraska, and we're turning those tests around in about 25 hours right now. So that's part of the key is if we can turn those tests around quickly, then we can make sure that we can do the contact tracing quickly, and then we keep people isolated if they've been infected, quarantined if they've been exposed, and that's the blocking and tackling of epidemiology that allows us to continue to control this. We've got significant amount of PPE on hand to be able to provide to our healthcare providers and so forth. We have adequate, more than adequate. We've got just a ton of space for quarantine, and we continue to serve people that way, though not very many. We provide it to the general public through UNO. We've got our program for first responders and healthcare providers, which I think we've got about 8 people using right now, and about 8 people that are using our program for food processing. So relatively limited use that kind of reflects the stable case of where we are here in the state of Nebraska. We're continuing to pursue plans with regard to, we put out plans with regard to homeless shelters, continuing to work on the food processing industry. We've got our ongoing plan with regard to long-term care facilities and allowing them to start receiving residents back in. That will be predicated on them doing testing of all their staff or staff and residents if they've got a case that's positive. And we've got long-term care facilities that are signing up for that, and that continues to go on. And again, we're doing pretty well in our state with regard to long-term care facilities. I think we rank in the top 20 as far as the infection rates and mortality rate there. So that's going well. And then one of the areas where we have an at-risk population is our correction system, and we're going to be allowing visitors, families to start allowing to visit inmates on July 13th, which has been a hardship for those families over the course of the last several months. But we believe that again, with robust testing and plans we have in place, we can allow for that to go forward as well, just like we're doing in the long-term care facilities. So those are kind of the key pillars that we built this entire plan to protect our hospital capacity. And we believe that is going along really well. We continue to ramp up all this stuff. We've got nearly 950 contact tracers trained between the state and our local public health departments. We're only using actually less than half of them right now just because we don't have that much demand, but we're planning to be able to ramp that up quickly if we need to as we go into this fall. So that's kind of the program where we are. We're in a stable condition right now, continuing to ramp up our capabilities, and we'll just work on testing and contact tracing to stay on top of it. Commissioner, back over to you.
Hey, thanks, Governor. And, one thing I would just add, and I don't think you and I've had a chance to talk about it too much, but I appreciated reaching out to Doug Carlson, and I know we've later got Craig Lofquist from the ESUs on the program here today, just talking about that PPE and being able to access some of the statewide order for that, especially around masks, I think has been important. And so we'll keep working with Doug on that front. And I don't know if there's anything else on that from a school perspective that you're thinking of, but otherwise we feel like we're pretty well connected to kind of make those things happen. So.
All right, great.
All right, thanks, Governor. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over. I think I see Teresa Anderson is on, and I think we've got. Oh, maybe we're doing maybe Pat Lopez and Charlotte Burke from Lincoln Lancaster County first to talk about masks, and then I think after that we'll go to Teresa Anderson to kind of talk about the core principles that the public health officials have been working with us on. So Pat and Charlotte, are you on?
Yes, we are here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sure can.
Okay.
Thanks, Pat.
All right, so we're going to just share a little bit about a campaign we've been working on here in Lincoln, jointly with Lancaster County Medical Society and the Health Department about the social distancing and covering your face and hand washing. So you're seeing one of the slides there. We've had quite a campaign that started now. We have 102 spots on TV. We're doing work on radio. We're doing more with the flood communication and Radio Lobo in Telemundo, Nebraska, and also the Hispanic radio station. Plus, like the Journal Star, we've been working with recently with the Department of Education about other messaging we can get out using a variety of students or others that can kind of talk to an age. We've been in communication with the University of Nebraska, both the here in Lincoln, both with the academic portion and the athletic portion about doing messaging, about masking and hand washing and social, just trying to talk about the physical distancing that's going on. So I think there's a little commercial. I don't know if you can play it, Zainab, or maybe. It's real short, and it's using one of our.
We know COVID-19 is spread person to person, which means we really have to be careful in public places. Protecting your health and reopening businesses can occur together. We just need to work together. Wear a mask in public places. Keep a 6-foot distance. Wash your hands well and often. Let's all do our part.
So we just thought we'd share it with you. And one of the other things that we provided to our schools is our Lancaster County Medical Society had sent a letter to Dr. Joel that we've also shared with all of our schools in Lincoln that was signed on in support of face covering, and additionally had 160 some physicians from the community sign on to that, just so parents know what the medical community is thinking about the use of face covering. So that's just a kind of a quick update on what we're doing. But you can see the campaign, there's many different aspects. I think there was another one you were going to play, Zainab, I'm not sure. Okay, I'll turn it back to you, Matt.
Teresa, would you please start? I think the commissioner's computer is restarted now, so I will turn it over to Teresa Anderson.
Okay, thank you. And we appreciate the work that's being done by schools to prepare for this fall. We know that it's difficult work, and we're hopeful that we can in some way make your lives a little bit easier. We have heard loud and clear a couple of things. We know that we want these kids to be in school. We know that's where they learn best, and for many reasons we want them to be there. The second thing we've heard is that you have clearly directed us at the local health department level to come across with some consistent messaging as far as principles. We know that this is COVID-19 and we've never seen a pandemic before, and it's a big learning curve for all of us. But one of the things that we're presenting to you today is our response for working with schools, just so that we can be clear on what it is we will be providing for you. And we hope that, again, our goal is knowing that the schools are each autonomous, individual. They have unique needs that as we work with you, that you will tell us where your issues are and what you would like us to help with. And this is what we're able to do as far as concerted effort across the state. So we are monitoring and evaluating public health data consistently and looking to where areas of concern might be rising. One of the ways that we're going to keep you all posted is through a COVID risk dial that will be placed on most every local health department's website. So you'll see that coming about and you'll hear more about that, but that takes into account what's going on locally. It also takes into account data that's provided to us from UNMC, and thanks to Lincoln Lancaster for sharing that. You'll see that before too much longer on the websites. We hope to have then associated with that some guidance for what schools can do when we're in the yellow, green, not green, but yellow, orange, and red zones. So we're continuing to monitor. We want your schools to stay open. We want our schools to stay open. We also know that working closely with our schools and ESUs to help develop reasonable plans for social distancing and masking is going to be essential. We know that each of these plans needs to be locally responsive and aim to create school environments that will minimize the impact on the school community and the student learning experience. We want students to be able to learn freely and to be present in school. Key recommendations based on this then is that we are promoting all staff and students to wear cloth face coverings over their nose and mouth whenever possible. We also know that general physical distancing of 6 feet between individuals whenever possible is part of the package deal, and frequent hand washing and or sanitizer. So we're looking at ways where we can keep these kids in school rather than have them in school for 2 or 3 days, have a positive case that exposed the entire classroom, have that class then have to be quarantined for 2 weeks. They bring them back in and someone else exposes them again. So we're doing our very best recommendations here, and that includes the cloth face coverings. We know when we get a positive case in the school, whether it's a student or a staff member or a visitor, then we will be available to assist you just as we have in other instances. Pertussis comes to mind. We had a bacterial meningitis case. You call us, we'll help you walk through it. We'll come in and we'll do the case investigation, the contact investigation to determine what exactly happened. We'll be working with you cooperatively to determine who all might be impacted by it. And then we will help guide through the next actions, knowing again that you are the decision makers and our role is to support you as you're working with our children. So when we look at those case investigations, we look at who all was exposed, and if the people who were not symptomatic can stay in the classroom. We're also looking at the number of people that need to be quarantined. So that's basically what that is. Between the matrix that helps us develop that risk dial that you'll be seeing is these recommendations. We will work with you individually to help develop your plans if you haven't already developed them. And please know that as we go into this fall, we want to be step in step with you going through this so that we can provide for you whatever you need from the public health perspective, knowing that your job in your institution, in your buildings, is going to be different than it was in previous years. And boy, you all had enough to contend with in a normal year. Let's add this on top of it. We want to be there for you. We're beefing up our resources and our capacity in order to provide that assistance. So consider us to be just a phone call away.
So thanks, Teresa. And there were just a couple of questions that popped up. One question maybe probably related to, and by the way, I got kicked off my computer, rebooted, and I'm back due to the magic of technology. But Teresa, one of the questions was just about the fact that we're multi-county and larger areas. I mean, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but is there any, what are the types of things we might be able to do to help kind of break those kind of things down a little bit for local school districts? Or do you want to touch on that a little bit?
Right. We've had multiple discussions about this, and even in our area out here in Grand Island, which is Hall, Hamilton, and Marion counties, we had the vast majority of our cases were here in Hall County, Marion County, and Hamilton. Some would say guilty by association with us, so they went with us as we went into a longer phase 2 period. And a phase 1 period actually. So we're working on that, and I think that some of the data that goes into developing that dial is data that probably is not going to be significant if it's spread out over as many counties as a panhandle has, because my goodness, they have a huge area. But what we would like to do in addition to providing that dial, because it's a dial, it has a lot of factors going into it, a lot of metrics going there, but we also would like, it also includes a subjective piece where we can say, yeah, you know, we think that, let's say Hall County should stay in the orange zone, but Hamilton County with 2 or 3 cases could certainly go down to the yellow zone. So that's something that each individual health department will work on.
Yeah, thank you for that, Teresa. So, and Pat, I don't know if you want to address any of that. There was another question, Pat, about kind of the individual kind of, I guess, approach to looking family by family and student by student. And it seems like maybe you're working on something on that front. I'll find the actual question here. That basically a health screener of some sort based on, you know, individuals, and you were working on some of that. I don't know if you want to touch on that now.
We are actually working on something so that it can help with parents and as a tool, kind of a reminder for what to check in the morning before they send their child off to school. I think we're still in the development stage, but we're pretty close, and we'll ask a couple schools to just try it out and see among themselves with the staff to see how it works. And we'll happily share that with anyone. But we'll also be looking at some of the other data that we can use for contact tracing. So we'll get back to you on that as soon as we have more, sister. So that's where we're at with that. The risk dial, I can answer. Part of that question is how it moves from one color to the next. I'll just kind of give a brief view of that. We look at the positivity rate, the number of tests that have been done, the number that come back positive, and that percentage rate. We look at how we're able to do contact tracing, if we're able to get cases worked within 24 hours of the time when we're given notice, or if there are delays. We look at the healthcare system and what our capacity is. We look at the availability of testing in the community. A lot of those are all factors that we use for some of the basic ones as we move forward, but we can also provide more education and a brief overview if that's something you'd like on one of the calls. And I'll definitely have some of our epidemiology staff work with us on that.
I appreciate that. And I think it's just good for folks to know that there's kind of going to be some work to kind of get that down at a different scale. So very much appreciate what all the local health directors are doing on that front. So I'm going to go ahead and transition us to the next slide. And again, thanks, Teresa, and thanks, Pat and Charlotte, for your efforts. I want to turn it over. I think I'm going to turn it over to Jack and let you introduce the crew that we got. I know we got Mark and Vern and Brian on, representative of some of the NERCSA work going on, but thanks to everyone who's been working together on that front. And Jack, thanks to you for your leadership on this front. So I'll turn it over to you.
Guess I should unmute first, right?
Well, it's sometimes better.
Yeah, thanks for having us on, and I'll just give a little introduction, then I'll turn over to the other three. We finished our document and released it Friday to our members. Tomorrow it's going to go out to, we're going to send it off to every school district in the state, even if they're not a member tomorrow, and some other education associations. It was always meant to be shared with everybody, and really what our document is just a lot of information to help districts as they develop their own plans. And We had 8 committees working on this all throughout June. Over 100 NERCSA superintendents and ESU administrators working on it. And 3 of our committee heads were Vern Fisher from Gibbon, Mark Linehan from Wayne, and Brian Ridinghouse from Pawnee City. And just thought maybe I'd kind of turn over those guys and talk about what they did within their committees and the whole process. So whichever one of you guys wants to start first. But not all at once.
Well, I can go, Jack. I was the chair of the transportation committee. This is Brian Ridinghouse at Pawnee City, and really, I think within our committee there were 3 key realities that we had to deal with when it pertains particularly to bus routes. Obviously, we have to get kids to school if we want to have school, and we got to be able to get them back home. Every district is different. Some districts transport very few of their students to and from school with transportation, and in many rural districts transport nearly all of their students to school. So every district is different, but for those of us that rely on buses to get kids to school, that's a necessity for us to open our doors. A second key reality is that bus drivers are probably the most difficult employees to hire in a school district. And I don't think that's exclusive to rural schools, urban schools. It's just hard to find, even when well paid, it's hard to find people that want to drive a school bus in 2020. So with that in mind, we have to, one, keep drivers safe because they are very irreplaceable. And secondly, in some cases, it may not, even if we have extra buses, due to the limited personnel that we have to legally drive those buses, we may not be able to offer additional routes. Because we don't have anyone to drive those buses, particularly if the routes are all running at the same time. That's, of course, assuming that all students will be in session for a full day. And because of the length of routes, it's just really not realistic in many rural schools anyway, to stagger bus routes and have a full day of instruction. And the third reality is that buses simply are not conducive, no matter what. Even the large activity buses are not conducive to social distancing. It's not realistic to sit students 6 feet apart on a bus and expect to get any substantial number of students onto the bus. I've heard potentially 17 on a large activity bus. So given those bleak realities, what we wanted to do is come up with a plan that tried to keep routes at full capacity, if at all possible, and the district felt that it was safe to do that, and provide some alternate considerations for districts to consider that may be applicable to their district to allow those routes to be as safe as possible for the duration of the time that the driver and the students are on the route.
So thanks, Brian, for that. You know, one thing I just wanted to highlight, and I've seen drafts of some of the work that's coming out, and obviously transportation in some of these places have been a big deal. I mean, and the red, kind of a red, yellow, green perspective on things like we're trying to do in other areas is very helpful too. So thanks, Brian.
Commissioner, I'd be willing to go next.
Yeah, go ahead, Vern.
I chaired the instruction class size committee, and similar to approach used by Mark and others, we broke ourselves into subcommittees tackling big topics ranging from Rule 10 requirements to assessment. What we noticed in that conversation is, and I'm sure everyone on this Zoom is seeing the same things, it's contextual in nature. What is needed or required in one setting may not be needed and required in another. So really wanted to put best practice out in front and have a dialogue about what best practice might be, and then how can we support local school districts. Similar to Brian, we found some big themes. One is that folks wanted some predictability and consistency in approach. So whatever was learned in the past could be applied in the future. We really wanted to support teaching and learning from the standpoint that if you move into an alternate learning environment, while some excel, that's not the best environment for others. So how do you balance support for those who are struggling in an environment that is much different than what they're comfortable with? But then also talking about how do we take the effort of what occurred in this particular process and replicate that in ways that help local school districts build plans that meet the needs of their respective constituencies. So was really proud to be a part of the process, and the group that we worked with took a lot of time out of their day to help contribute to a product that I think is going to serve as a wonderful resource for school districts, regardless of size.
Thanks, Vern, for that too. And I do again, I guess I would kind of echo everyone's commitments and time on this has been remarkable work. So thanks for that. So Mark.
Yes, thank you. Hi, everybody. Mark Linehan from Wayne. Hope everybody's doing well. I really do want to give a kudos to Jack Moles and also to John Scretta from ESU 6. They really put this together, kept everybody moving forward in the right direction. We came up with this document in about a month worth of work, and I know they sat on most of the committees and contributed a lot. So they did a wonderful job leading us. I was on the custodial health committee, and we talked a lot about employee and student safety. We talked about screening, visitor restrictions, masks, other personal protective equipment. Then we went into facilities cleaning, just some general topics of what might be covered there. Talked a lot about preventative material and inventory and making sure there's good inventory of all of the materials and equipment that are needed. And then we talked about supports and training. Got in a little bit to the issue of mental health, and some good resources, I think, are part of that document that people will be able to access. And I just think the best part of the process was my committee was about 16 or 17 people from all over the state of Nebraska. And first of all, it really just gave me a lot of confidence in the leadership around the state. There's just some tremendous superintendents and ESU administrators and leaders in our state that have really taken on, something that we're all not exactly experts on. I don't think any of us were trained for going through pandemic response when we went through our coursework. So just to see that leadership and to get to know people that probably didn't know before, but also, and it was alluded to, I think the document is going to be very valuable for schools because we decided early that we weren't going to make recommendations or make it sound like it was prescriptive. We wanted it to be more where schools can take considerations and then make it work for them. And I think, with all the differences in sizes of school and locations in the state, I think that's really, in my mind, what the best part of the document is. I think everybody will be able to take it and move forward with plans that they have that fit their community. And so that was, really the experience that, to think within about a month of meetings and things that it really came out to be done. I think the initial goal was the July board meetings, and it was done sometime even in the month of June. So it was a lot of good work by a lot of really good people.
Yeah, thanks for that too, Mark. Jack, can I turn it back over to you, kind of what your next steps are and kind of when this starts to go out across the state? So.
Yeah, like I said, Friday we shared it with all of our NERCS superintendents and ESU administrators. Tomorrow we'll send it out. We'll email it out to all other superintendents and ESU administrators that are not members of NERCS. But also it'll go out to all of our other members. We've got members listed who are board members, principals, like that. We'll send it to all of them also. And if anybody else wants it, they can have access to it. Just contact us. Before I go off, I'd like to just put out a couple really strong thank yous. One to John Scretta for working with me in leading the project. John referred to it as herding cats sometimes, and that's kind of what it was, but in the end, it really came together well. The other one is Elisa Taylor. She's employed at ESU 6 in their production department, and she ended up producing the final document for us and did a marvelous job with it. So really thank you to those two. So that's all I have for you.
Well, thanks, Jack. And truly, as this gets released, and I know you've been working closely with Lane, and we'll be happy to put it up on the Launch Nebraska site to further disperse it. But thanks to all of you for your work. I know you had lots of other folks involved in it as well. So thanks to everyone that participated. So really very much appreciate it. And we'll keep dialoguing on those things and see how we can do those next steps. So I'm going to turn over to Craig Lofquist. And again, thanks to Craig and all the ESU folks that have been doing a lot of work in coordination with schools at their regional level, but also across the state. And appreciate that ongoing partnership, Craig. So turn it over to you. And I think we got kind of a list of subjects for you, but take them on as you see fit. Thanks.
Well, I'll try to be brief. Each of the items that I'm going to address today have already been alluded to during the prior conversation. So thanks for your time, everybody. Now, the first one is the mask update. There was an order that we had talked about, we were comfortable with, that was submitted, but it was returned by FEMA. And FEMA actually kicked it back and said they wanted a 75-25% cost split. So at the state level, they came up with that. Doug Carlson resubmitted the order right away. We're waiting to hear back. We're not expecting any problems because it's what FEMA had actually requested. So we think that one's going to work, but in the event that it doesn't, we do have a backup plan or an alternate plan for the adult size masks. And in that particular one, I think we're looking at like 76 to 78 cents per mask, which the cost would be covered, but we might not be able to get one for every day of the week for each of the students and teachers. But the adult mask one appears to be covered. We're going to have more information by the end of the week is what we're told on the adult size mask. The child size mask is a different story. We're still working on getting these. The folks at the top have reached out to Hanes, the company that makes t-shirts, underwear, sweatpants, stuff like that, to see if they can complete the order. We're sure we're not the only state that's trying to get the child size mask. So at this point, there's not a lot to share other than we continue to work on it. We were really impressed with the uniform set of principles that the local health department had developed and was shared by Teresa Anderson today. So that was really helpful. There was a comment or some comments, and some of them were alluded to today about wearing the masks in different counties, different settings. And in some context or some circles, there's some concerns about the word recommended or whenever possible. That seems like weasel language, but there are some schools that are concerned about liability. It seems like the thick of thin things, but it's really not for those that are seasoned administrators. So as this work goes forward, Teresa, you did a great job presenting today. We'd like to just chat with you about maybe adjusting some of the language. And then the last item that I had is, everybody's getting the hand sanitizer now, but we're struggling at this time to get the dispensers, the ones that you hang on the wall. We were contacted early this morning that the ones that have been ordered, the light and foamy dispensers from Home Depot, that order's been canceled because they can't find the raw plastic materials to manufacture them. So we are working on comparable dispensers at this time, and I don't have any specifics other than that to share with you. If for some reason you have received the light and foamy dispensers that go on the wall, and they work well. If you could please contact me and or Craig Peterson at our co-op purchase, we'd like to hear from you to see how well they work, to get something comparable. And that's all I have, Dr. Bloomstead.
Yeah, thanks, Craig, for that. And I do think as we kind of keep refining some of that, I think on the mask stuff, we'll have a little bit more guidance coming out. And like Teresa was talking about, we'll keep kind of working on that front. And then just thanks for all the, I know it's going to be a challenging time. I did see a question, Craig, and I don't know if you can help me address it or not, but around private schools and access to masks. Has that been part of the dialogue? I know I've had that.
Those have been, they're included in there, each and every one.
Yeah.
By ESU. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good
Thanks
question.
a lot. Yeah, that's a great point. So again, thanks, Craig, for that. And thanks to all the ESU folks, and keep up the good work. Thanks for that. I'm going to turn it over to Lane Carr. I think that's who we have up next anyway. And Lane, or I'll turn it on over to you to talk a little bit about Launch Nebraska and the update.
Excellent. Hello, everybody. I'm going to be very quick because I know that Dean Folkers, Shirley Vargas, and Corey Epler are going to be speaking here very soon. Just really high level, quick updates. So we've been working really furiously to get some answers to your questions, specifically around guidance on attendance. So a student who's immunocompromised, what do we do about them if they're unable to come to school, or if their parents choose to not come to school? Those kinds of questions that are really good questions. We're working with our Rule 10 folks to really think about what that looks like. We're answering questions or trying to answer questions and provide guidance on things like instructional units and instructional hours. And so trying to get that to you as quickly as we can. We also anticipate a lot of concerns and questions around human capital. So teachers, substitutes, endorsements, et cetera. So we're putting together some guidance and some FAQs there. Probably the thing that is most in demand right now is this leveled guidance. So now we have the risk dials, and now that our districts, our local public health districts, are developing those dials for us at the regional level, and in some cases at the district and school level, what do we do now? What are the things that we need to have in place? So those that guidance document is under review by DHHS as well as UNMC, and we're getting a lot of really good feedback. We really hope to get those answered out by the middle of this week so that we can format it and get it to you early next week. And it's really in close alignment with the work that we've seen from our partners at NERCSA, and I'm very thankful that you all kind of took that up and ran with it. The last piece that I'll say here, and then I'll turn it over to whoever is next, is under the continuity of learning strand in Launch Nebraska. Transitions was really focused on those students that were going to post-secondary or career in the 2020 graduation season and year. So we're really rethinking that area. Corey Epler is leading that, and we'll be kind of convening some thought partners around what we really need to be putting in and being more robust in transitions from early childhood to elementary, middle, high, and beyond. So expect more on our Launch Nebraska site. And thank you for your questions. Keep them coming as they come in. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Vargas now to talk a little bit more about that leadership and planning section. Shirley?
Thanks, Lane. Good afternoon, everyone. So we've been working with Instruction Partners, a national organization that has really a pulse across the country and even internationally around what are some of the processes, protocols, procedures that different leaders are putting in place to ensure that they're taking the appropriate steps and actions to ensure the safety and security of teachers and leaders and students. So they break this up in 3 different steps. So first, really thinking about the committee that's making these decisions, visions for success, priorities, and then moving into how, based on staffing needs, are we going to create the different schedules for the 3 types of scenarios that we discussed at our last meeting a couple of weeks ago, and also in alignment with our budget. And then lastly, how do we then tie in instruction? How do we tie in all the different professional development, all these other things, and finalize the budget so that we're making the best possible decisions? And with the work of Instruction Partners and also the learning that we have from a few school districts that we've been engaging with, we've been able to really think about and codify a process that we want to make sure we leave all of our district administrators with as they're engaging in their planning and preparation for the upcoming school year. And the next slide that we have here, thank you. Oh, well, the next slide that we have talks about that first step. So really thinking about identifying priorities. So I appreciate that NERCSA document, because what we want to make sure that we're, we can go one more slide. What we want to make sure that we identify is what are the guiding principles that's leading the work that we're doing, and how are we engaging multiple stakeholders in that decision-making process so it's not a unilateral decision, and also that we're prioritizing the learners that need the most instruction, and that piece around equity of education, and we're being explicit around that as well. So beginning with the end in mind, looking at the data that we've had for the last school year, and also thinking about surveying families and staff. So there's more guidance coming, and we wanted to just provide this quick snapshot of that. And I'm gonna now turn it over to whoever's doing the turning over.
I think Corey must be next, huh?
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I'll echo my colleagues in saying we don't have much time, so we'll try to talk fast. A couple things I wanted to preview they'll be forthcoming under continuity of learning. So under the leadership of CCSSO, there is a document, a resource that is in final stages in preparation for release, specifically around instruction. And the document includes the 4 broad categories that you see on the slide around essential instructional content for literacy and math, instructional materials and curriculum, assessment and professional learning. One of the things I think that's going to be unique about this guidance is it provides some broad action steps, but then it gets into some very specific steps that you would need to be taking relative to an in-person scenario, a remote scenario, or the many hybrid scenarios that might exist. Additionally, it'll link to specific resources that you'll be able to utilize. The hope is that a district might be able to take what we're going to customize from the national guidance and then specifically adapt it for your district, or take and use as is. So I received the second to final draft on Saturday, and doing some initial editing today and tomorrow. We'll have some of the broad steps up this week. And then as we get some additional days under our belt, we'll be able to provide some of the customized pieces for Nebraska. So I think this is going to complement the resources that are out there really nicely. And I appreciate what NERCSA has provided. I appreciate the consistency in how they've messaged their work aligned with NDEs. So I think this will even be able to take the document that you saw a little bit ago and provide some greater depth and some more specificity as we approach July. So just stay tuned as always.
Yeah, thanks, Corey. And as Corey kind of mentioned, some of the national scene, we're also trying to track, obviously from everything from CARES Act. So I anticipate another wave of federal funding to come through. We've been in kind of regular conversation with our DC connections as well. But also just as I think about where we go with assessment and accountability and other fronts, really are trying to watch that. So I'm going to turn it over to Dean Folkers, I think, who's next in the queue here. And thanks, Dean, for joining. Thanks to Lane and Shirley and Corey, too, for all of your hard work.
Great. Well, thanks, Commissioner. So mine actually will be short because for those that are used to this time of the session, my alarm will start going off here for the 8-minute warning and to let me know that we are just about out of time. But ultimately, real quick, a reminder around the digital learning profile and plans. Those are the efforts that we are undertaking to collect public and non-public information about technology needs to help support the use and identification of the GEARS Act resources, in addition to some of the statewide CARES Act resources around closing the digital learning gap. And so these, the information provided through the digital learning profile and plans will help prioritize and identify the specific needs of the schools and how we utilize those resources. Now, July 6th was the deadline, and I think when we were working through the elements of planning, the ultimate goal of having people spend their holiday Independence Day weekend completing the digital learning plans maybe wasn't the most thoughtful. Right now we have 240 schools, districts that have responded. We have 234 that are in process. And so what we have decided to do is to provide an extra week. And so July 13th, a week from today, an exciting day, will be the deadline for submitting those. And so for those that have already submitted, thank you. And for those that have additional questions or need some additional time, let us know. Contact myself or Dora and Avi. Thank you, Commissioner.
So thanks, Dean. Couldn't find my unmute button. I do think we've kind of concluded that. I was just checking to see, there was one question I think that popped up, and I think I can answer it, but Lane, maybe you can join me in this one. I think we had one question pop up about guidance for cafeteria settings, lunchroom settings, and I believe that's going to be part of our written guidance coming out as well, being reviewed. So Lane, anything you want to add on that front?
Nope, that's exactly right. We have some more general guidance on large gatherings or gatherings in schools, and then very specific around the lunchroom. So it's kind of zoom out and a zoom in as well.
Yeah. So maybe what I'll kind of conclude with is, obviously we have a lot of work going forward, but I also think a lot of progress by a lot of your work across the state, everyone's work that they've been doing. Every time we go into one of this, I know next time we're going to have another focus on some schools that are doing some work. I think kind of a mix of schools, probably from the central area of the state, that are doing some remarkable work too. What I really do appreciate about everyone is sharing, thinking through best practices. Our ultimate goal is getting kids back in school and keeping kids in school as we get into the fall. That's the real effort. I know in some areas of the state where we've had little or maybe even no cases, right? We're hoping that in those senses, we're essentially operating in however the public health officials do it by. But if it's in the green, that's giving us our specific guidance based on those colors. I do appreciate the ongoing alignment to do that. I know in our more populated areas of the state, those challenges might look a little bit different, but we're really all in this very much together. I think you'll see that we continue to try to provide that support as best we can from the state level, but it's actually in supporting one another that we're making this progress. So, I think one of the big fronts for us is helping kind of get that communication out there broadly. In fact, I just saw Bill McAllister send a question on that front, getting it out in front of parents. So we're going to be kind of moving on some different communications campaigns and being able to get that information out and kind of really back you up on your decision making that you're making at a local level too. So I just want to thank everyone for the ongoing efforts. We'll do this again in a couple weeks. Obviously send questions through all the channels that you have been. We'll continue to do that work. Thanks to all the partners, thanks to Issues, NERCSA, and every school official that's out there really making this come together. I'm very proud of the work that we're doing in Nebraska and pleased to see that kind of continue. So thanks everyone. Thanks Teresa. And I don't know if Pat Lopez is still on yet, maybe she is. Thanks to the local health folks that are doing really yeoman's work, and we'll keep working together on this. So thanks a lot, everyone. So have a great week, and we'll have more coming out all the time. So take care, everyone.